Up and seeing 7 minutes or 6 minutes after the hour 7, we will begin. There are no open forum requests for this evening, so I will call the regular school board meeting for the Prior Lake Savage Area Schools into order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I thought about that a month ago. You got to remember to get that.
Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved.
By Lee. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Todd. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. The consent agenda items are considered to be routine in nature and are enacted by one motion. They include check wire transfer disbursement summary, bank reconciliation statement, approval of the school board minutes from December 11th, resignations, terminations, and non-renewals. Do I have a motion for the acceptance of the consent agenda?
So made.
By Stacy. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Lee. There's no discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0. Next on the agenda is the resolution for the acceptance of gifts. Tonight we have gifts from the Benevitti Community Impact Fund for Hidden Oaks Middle School, for Marcia Cheetah from Give Minnesota for Westwood Elementary School, and a gift from Mr. and Mrs. Frembergens for the band program at Prior Lake High School. Do I have a motion for the acceptance of the gifts?
So made.
By Stacy. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Mary. All those this is a resolution, so it requires a roll call vote. Melissa?
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That passes 6-0. Next on the agenda is the Laker Pride, Dr. Stallo.
Well, since the microphone's not out, instead of worrying about that right now, I'll go ahead and say my comments and then invite our honoree up to the front. Tonight, during Laker Pride, we're honoring the Prior Lake Chamber of Commerce for their long history in partnering with Prior Lake Savage Area Schools. Particularly tonight, we're going to talk a little bit and celebrate the work around the Tree of Warmth clothing drive that the Prior Lake Chamber has organized winter after winter to help students in our schools. Over the past 10 years, the Prior Lake Chamber has organized this winter drive. Thousands of hats, caps, mittens, gloves have been donated to our students. The Chamber has also partnered with multiple businesses that have agreed to be drop-off areas so our residents can drop off those materials and then be distributed to our schools. You can see here this picture is just some of the contents that were provided for our students this year. So joining us tonight, and I would invite her to join me, is the president of the Prior Lake Chamber, Sandy Fleck, who has been absolutely instrumental in continuing this tradition of supporting our students. We'd like to honor Sandy, the Prior Lake Chamber Board of Directors, our chamber businesses, and all of the residents who have taken the time to drop off these materials that benefit our students. Materials go to our schools, then that get distributed to the students who really need those. So I want to thank you, Sandy, for everything that you have done with this and over the years, and for truly being a great partner. So thank you very much. I have asked Sandy just to say a few words, knowing how much we appreciate everything that you're doing to support our schools.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this award. Laker Pride, having 2 kids grow up in this school district, I know this is an awesome award, so thank you. We started the Tree of Warmth many years ago, It was a vision that we had, and what we love the best with our businesses and residents donating these items is that it stays right here in our neighborhood. To these kids that go to our school, maybe they don't have the warm socks or the hats or the gloves or the coats. We love to give back, and that is one of the things we like to do. So thank you for this award. The Prior Lake Chamber of Commerce thanks you, and I thank you.
Next on the agenda is personal items, candidates for employment. That will be presented by Mr. Matt Mons.
All right, good evening, board members. Dr. Stallo. First up, I would like to recommend the following candidates for employment, and am seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion for the acceptance of the candidates for employment?
So moved.
By Melissa, do I have a second?
Second.
By Mary? Discussion? None. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0. Next on the agenda is the approval of leaves of absence. Mr. Matt Mons.
And next, I present the following leaves of absence, and am seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion for the approval of the leaves of absence?
So moved.
By Todd, do I have a second?
Second.
By Lee. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0. We have no unfinished business tonight, so next on the agenda is new business. And item A, mid-year goal progress report presented by Superintendent Dr.
Super.
Super, baby. Superintendent Dr. Stallo.
Thank you very much. Good evening to everyone, and Happy New Year to you. As 2018 begins, it marks the almost halfway point in our academic year. One of the stories that we write each day is how to continually improve and get better as a school district. The systems we've designed and the processes we use ensure that improvement is the center of our daily work. Tonight I'm going to provide an overview of our district continuous improvement system and a brief update on progress of the work aligned to those goals. We believe in shared leadership, and this visual demonstrates the alignment of the district goals and the district-wide priority work to all of our improvement efforts. The inclusivity of all staff contributing to our improvement is evident as the schools and the departments have improvement plans and action plans that are implementing in addition to the daily work that they do in learning teams and collaborative teams and with students and other staff members each day. The previous slide shows how the administration and the staff work to ensure improvement. This visual includes the comprehensive system of continuous improvement, including the role of the school board in the blue outside rings, as well as the importance of stakeholder engagement through the entire district improvement process. And as you know, everything we do, including our district system of continuous improvement, is aligned to our strategic plan. We're intentional in the work we do and the way that we do that work in order to achieve our mission for all students. Board members create a 3-year agenda to ensure that your time is focused on work aligned to the 5 school board functions: district policy, operational oversight, board governance, superintendent relations, and public engagement. Board members review and monitor the progress of these goals monthly during board work sessions. In addition to Minnesota's World Best Workforce Accountability System, we've also created a district balance scorecard, which measures and monitors outcomes aligned to both our strategic plan as well as other measures that we believe are important to the overall success of students. Well, our district goals are written as priority statements and monitored yearly. We know that a lot of the work that we're doing right now is really multi-year in nature. We have core work, which is outlined in the green up here, and I'm sure you can all read that really well. We can get anyone copies of this that would like them. But the green work demonstrates our improvement efforts in the core work that we're doing, the daily work that we do. As that work becomes operationalized and becomes just the way we do things, it'll move off this and we will continue to monitor it, but it won't be highlighted as priority work. Our strategic direction improvement work, that work that's outlined in purple, represents new work that we've embarked on either this year or last year, and that has formal plan, do, study, act PDSA processes around those. Tonight we've provided in your packet, board members, mid-year reports outlining progress on those district goals and priority work noted in that previous slide, the green and purple work. I will not be reporting out specifically on each of those goal areas, as I know board members had a chance to review that mid-year progress. In addition, at upcoming meetings, administrators and staff will be updating you as we go through the rest of the school year. However, I would like to provide just a quick refresher on those district goals and a review of the work in which we've been engaged. So in strategic direction A, increasing measurable student growth and achievement, it's really about our focus on instructional leadership. We continue to build a framework for instruction that integrates the collaborative work of learning teams, our standards-based grading and reporting, or our AGR principles and practices, as well as teams working to create systems of support for all of our students using a multi-tiered system of support for academic and social and emotional learning. The Laker Learning Plan is being implemented to transform teaching and learning, and students are supported to use technology as they gain skills to prepare themselves for their futures. Later tonight, Assistant Superintendent Jeff Holmberg will be providing an update on the Educational Equity and Excellence Plan as part of this strategy. And at Laker Pride last month, we celebrated teachers who are heavily engaged in professional development and teaching and helping one another improve their literacy instruction, which is the last goal in Strategic Direction A. Strategic Direction B addresses our financial accountability, and we've been working intensely over the past few months on long-range planning, and that work has taken on new meaning with the voter approval of our additional operating revenue as well as a bond to support additional facilities. Certainly that planning will be continuing as well. Strategic Direction 6 demonstrates our commitment to exploring opportunities for stakeholders to enhance our innovation along with our MNCAPS programming. Again, later this evening, Mr. Holmberg will be bringing forward a request to support our joint agreement regarding MNCAPS. Strategic Direction D finds us advancing our E-STEM efforts by expanding computer science, including our coding skills, especially at our elementary schools, and continuing to be intentional in our green ribbon work. Our focus and work of Strategic Direction E, integrating technology for teaching and communication, finds us in a study engaged in the use of district tools to advance our efficiencies and to make sure that we've got consistent protocols in how we're using some of those tools. And finally, Strategic Direction F includes a review and improvement of our Prior Lake Savage Area Schools student, parent, and staff stakeholder surveys that will be implemented for the second time later this year. Our other goal around this strategy was to ensure a strong communication plan regarding the referendum. That work now has moved into strong communication around the progress of our planning and construction process. Again, Mr. Holmberg will be presenting an update on that later in the meeting, and you can expect regular updates at work sessions and at regular board member meetings regarding that. The PDSA quality tool that we use is an approach to continuous improvement where teams establish a charter and it outlines the work throughout the year. The plan portion of that helps us to determine what it is we want to improve and to study that, to look at the gaps and the root cause of those gaps as we seek improvement. When we conduct that root cause analysis, we try to determine what it is that's going to help us move from our current state to our desired state, which gets us into the improvement theory that we create in the do part of the PDSA, and how then we implement improvement to achieve the outcomes that we're seeking. We study those outcomes as we look to see if implementing that improvement theory made a difference with our outcomes or not, and that helps us then make decisions moving forward, whether we standardize the practice and the improvement that we had, or if we start over with that process and continue to study it. So just as tonight I very quickly walked through the PDSA process, really that green and purple work and how we do district-wide continuous improvement. But the work of continuous improvement, as you can see in this visual, really happens every single day as our schools work on their school continuous improvement plans, our departments work on the department improvement plans, our learning teams do work constantly that align to their school goals, and ultimately as our teachers and our staff continue to track and monitor the progress of students and the progress of our processes and systems as we seek improvements. So our story is one of continuous improvement in order to increase student learning and student outcomes. Throughout the rest of the year, as I said before, we'll continue to update you on our district goals as part of your operational oversight. I'm really proud of the improvement work in which we've been engaged. I'm proud of our staff, and I'm grateful to the leaders in our staff who engage in this every single day. Thank you.
All right, this being a report, and there's no formal board action required, are there any questions on this area for Dr. Stallo? Seeing none, we will proceed to item number B, Strategic Direction A, Increasing Measurable Student Growth and Achievement, Report on Operational Plan 1F, Educational Equity and Educational Excellence, presented by Mr. Holmberg, Assistant Superintendent.
Good evening, Chair Wolf, members of the board, Dr. Stallo. As Dr. Stallo forecasted in her mid-progress report, I think I'm going to be spending some time with you this evening, going through the next several agenda items. So I'm happy to do so, and it's really a privilege to be able to speak to you about the work that we're doing in a mid-year progress with some of those short-term as well as long-term goal areas. I do come with a bit of a cadre of friends with me on this presentation, and I'll be inviting them up here shortly. But Mrs. Karen Zwolensky, our Westwood Elementary Principal, Mrs. Julie Siegel, Hidden Oaks Assistant Principal, Mr. Dave Brown, Bridges ALC Coordinator, will be joining me midpoint, where they'll be talking a little bit about our work with excellence and equity and how they're doing the work at their buildings and with their staff and with students. And then finally, toward the end of the presentation, Dr. Stallo and I will tag team a little bit on Reimagine Minnesota to talk a little bit about what's happening in the metro-wide area that's really matching a lot of the work that we're doing here in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools. So the first part of this presentation, I'm going to be setting the stage, and we'll do a little bit of recapping, but also talking a little bit about setting the stage for really the work that we're doing now. I do want to point out to you that what I'm going to be showing you tonight is an updated presentation. And so, it's particularly when it comes to some of the graphs and some of the data at the front end. And I'll point that out to you as we go through this presentation. But after the meeting, I will be sure to email it to you, as well as we'll upload it to Board Books. We have this updated for our records. And so, we're going to start with our strategic plan, and I've highlighted parts of our mission, core values, and strategic directions that's aligned to the work in excellence and equity. And obviously, we talk a lot about educating all learners, full potential, and global societies, global community, but really matches well with our core values and strategic directions, and it really is that solid framework that with excellence and equity that indeed we are focusing on all students and really identifying where students are struggling, whether it be academically, socially, emotionally, attendance, behavior, and then talking in partnership with families and with students and staff how we can help them move out of being at risk or help them through that process, because really as a school community, For many kids, we are a stable part of the family and a part of the students' lives when they're with us from pre-K all the way through 12th grade. And so it's really a privilege as well as an honor that our staff are participating and engaging with kids on a day-to-day basis. This is our priority work and goal. You've seen this before. I have underlined and italicized part of it because that's our focus this year, is looking at culturally responsive teaching strategies and learning environments, family engagement, and professional development. That is, number one, our goal, is professional development, supporting our staff, and increasing student engagement. That's what it boils down to. We'll be going through a variety of slides. If you can take away those two things, professional development for our staff and increasing student engagement, that's, at the end of the day, that's what I want you to take away from this presentation. Here's the why. We've shared this with you. We do have achievement gaps. We're taking a look at graduation rate here. And we also see, too, that we see where we've minimized the gaps or decreased the gaps, and we've also seen where some of the gaps we've decreased and then we've fallen back and then we've gone forward. And so this is a very district-wide level, looking at graduation rate. We've also shared these graphs with you as well that can kind of be overwhelming. This shows 3 years worth of data from 2015, 16, and 17 as far as where those gaps are and how we're making progress with gaps as a district level, as well as looking at beyond ethnicity, looking at special education, free and reduced price lunch, English learner, and we're also looking at meeting criteria for homelessness. We do have instances where students in our community and in our school district are experiencing homelessness, and so we are tracking that as well, because as students go through transition in their life, that's where students and families can experience a lot of challenges, particularly with looking at behavior, for sure attendance, as well as academics. This is an additional slide. This slide is new here when we get beyond the percentages and we start looking at really district-wide the number of students that we have in these student groups. When we look at ethnicity, special ed, free and reduced, and the CTSTR is a new acronym, and that means count too small to report. And so in those areas, we have to have at least 10 students. And so as we go through our data, from the state level, they will identify areas that say count too small to report. However, what we're going to be presenting to you tonight is how we are indeed reaching out to students within those categories, and we are reaching out and identifying and finding ways to support those students. But it does break down from a comparison group, and we start to tell a little bit more compelling story district-wide, where our achievement gaps are higher, as well as where some are lower, some are narrower. For math, looking at our achievement gap, you probably see some similarities. And again, I'm going through this quickly because these are things that you've seen, and I really want to get to, how sites are utilizing this information, this one set of information, to connect with students and move forward. Here's our district-wide student group with math. Again, looking at the actual raw data, numbers of students proficient, and looking at gaps. And you can see that there are some groups that we really don't have much of an achievement gap, and others where we do have larger gaps with our student populations. From the district, and this is where I find it really impactful, and shortly I'll have our three administrators join me, is the work that we've been doing this year by breaking the district data down to site data. What I've shared up here, I've taken one of our elementary schools and I've listed example elementary. It is one of our elementary schools, and it's a report that our building principal would receive, and looking at this data through our new data warehouse, Tableau. And when it breaks it down, American Indian student, they get a real customized look at the student groups in their buildings that are where there are achievement gaps or where there's not achievement gaps, and where they're seeing groups of students that are not really large. I think one of the things that I want to talk about is, as a district, we've always prided ourselves on relationships with families and students and making connections. And this is really the heart of the work here, as principals working with their staff around, as we look at the 15 students or look at the 31 students in special education, at the site level, we do see faces of students. And our staff are meeting and engaging with kids on a day-to-day level. And they know those students, and they know those families. And so data is what it is. It doesn't prescribe or tell us what to do, but it gives us points that as staff, partnership with parents and students to say, what is the data telling us and how can we support students to improve? Again, whether it's academics, whether it's social, emotional, whether it's attendance or behavior. And that's why I put this in here, because I wanted to give you as board members really an example of really what principals are looking at with their instructional leadership teams and their learning teams, as far as, we know who the kids are and we can get to the individual level. The question that we've continued to ask ourselves in the district this year is, who are our underserved students? Whether that be academics, whether it be attendance, behavior, who are students that are showing signs of where they're struggling or they need additional support? And then who are the adults that are connected with those students? Who are the Phi Ed teacher, the classroom teacher, the EL teacher, the dean of students, the counselor, the coach, and really talking about what are the ways that we can deepen connections with kids and families so that the school community is the constant and can step in and support the student as they continue to move forward. This is, again, same elementary school looking at math data. This is one of our largest elementary schools. It's interesting that even though it's one of our largest elementary schools, we still have a couple categories where we have the counts that are too small to report. We also see, too, that in this particular school, for 2 or more races, we don't have an achievement gap. They're actually outperforming our compare group in both reading and math, which in some ways is an anomaly. And when you compare it to the district, that's a very different story that when you look at that district level data. Dee, did you have a question?
I just want clarification on what the comparison group is.
Yeah.
Is that, well,
so for
could you explain what that is?
For ethnicity, that would be white students. For special education students, the comparison group is non-special education. For free and reduced price lunch students, the comparison group is non-free and reduced price lunch students. For homeless students, the comparison group is non-homeless students.
Non-homeless.
Correct.
Okay, so just the opposite of what?
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Good question.
And Jeff, I've got a question too,
Yeah.
because you had mentioned that, with the largest elementary school, et cetera, there's a socioeconomic strata with each of these elementary schools too. Is that considered in the analysis?
Absolutely, and that's actually a great question, and a point of why I'm bringing it up tonight is that where the rubber really hits the road is at the site level with building leaders working with their instructional leadership, because we have different free and reduced price lunch levels at all of our buildings. A couple of our elementary schools are 20% and above, and some are below our district average in free and reduced price lunch. So we do have some disparities between our elementary schools, and that's why it's important that our data gets to the site level and gets to the classroom level. These, I have 3 slides here. These were presented back in March, and this was a summation really as why are we doing this work. We're finding existing achievement gaps. While we look at student achievement data, incorporating into curriculum improvement and program reviews, we need to continue to do that, but we also need to, again, focus on this. How are we engaging students in the learning? Continue to look at how can we get better? How can we improve the programs we have? We have great programs that are working for many students. We don't want to take any of those programs away or diminish those programs, but what are some other things that we can do to connect kids in different ways? And then, of course, engagement in community and school district stakeholders. And this is the one thing that I've been talking about here is really our focus this year is developing a systematic approach for professional development. And that's our work this year. That's also the work we're going to be looking at next year as well. And that's our work with Dr. Shiraki Hawley. And then again, our current reality. We've been looking at we've certainly focused on the achievement gap. We've conducted family focus groups in the past, and we've hosted a World Cafe. But it's really helped us to refine our vision, and that is excellence for all students. That's what it boils down to, is excellence for all students, where students are finding ways to connect with school in some way and finding really student agency, where they feel connected to the learning, they feel connected to the elementary school they attend, they feel connected to the middle school, they feel connected to the activities they're participating in. The family feels connected to the community, either through community education programs or through our ALC or for families that may need diploma after being school age. I'm forgetting that acronym right now. But again, trying to connect with family and community so that the school is that center where no matter where they're at in life, they can find connection with the school district and find connection for their kids, for themselves, and meet them where they're at. With that, I'm going to invite our three administrators up, and I'm going to be turning it over to them a little bit here to talk about our professional development and the cohort process, because the process here has been really it's been a bit organic. I mean, you're finding different leaders engaging with staff members, students, and families in different ways. And that's the complexity of this work, but that's the brilliance of this work as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Walensky.
All right. Good evening. So how do we serve our underserved students? We get to know them deeply. And as Jeff mentioned, it all starts with relationships. But we have an awesome data warehouse named Tableau, in which we have all the data points for our kiddos. And that includes behavioral data, achievement data, and attendance data. So we dig deep. Let me give you some examples of how we've done this at the elementary level. At the beginning of the year, all the grade level teachers spend a half a day with each other. For example, fourth grade team will come in for a half day, and we pull up all the data in our data warehouse, and we study every single child one by one by one. We talk about them. We talk about their strengths. We talk about where their areas of needs are. And then we put things in place. And we put in place strategies and interventions that they specifically need. So another area that we look at very closely as a staff is our discipline area. So we have an arsenal of behavior data that we look at, and we just recently did this in December where our team came together, every staff member on our roster, and we looked at the trends we saw in, for example, the patterns we found, days of the week, or behavior incidents at certain times of the day, and particular kinds of incidents. So we looked at those trends, and then we worked with that and made determinations on what we needed to be more proactive with. So our social emotional learning team and our PBIS team has launched into working with that.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Stallo. My name is David Brown. It's a great opportunity to be here to brag a little bit about what we're doing at Bridges at the ALC regarding our data warehouse. In specifics, Tableau, how I use Tableau is in association to our jump days. And so what I'll do is I'll call up Tableau and I'll look at every student's data. And we have about 100 students at the ALC, so I can go through every single student. We have a jump day about every other week or about twice a month. And so what I do is I take a look at their data, and it gives me a great snapshot of how they are doing with their attendance, how they're doing with their grades. We kind of know how they're doing socially, emotionally. And so what we do then is we use that data to tell them whether or not they need to be in attendance for our jump day to receive needed interventions. And so I can look at their data, I'll call the students into my office, and having about 100 students after 2 days, I can tell you it's I'm ready for a little bit of break after talking to that many students after a couple of days and going through all their data and letting them know how they're doing. And it's a great opportunity for me to validate them and affirm them as individuals by using this tool. And what happens is if they're struggling, if I see some concerns, I'm able to talk with them about that and say, all right, so you're going to come into this intervention day, which is addresses what do we do for our students who are not learning or are not progressing. You're going to come into this intervention day and have some dedicated time in the areas that you need in order to help you progress. Conversely, on the flip side, if a student is progressing very well and they're doing great things, it gives me an opportunity to offer them some enrichment opportunities and hybrid opportunities in celebration for their learning and to continue their learning. And so this is a great tool that really helps me. And doing this, having these kinds of conversations regularly with all the students at Bridges has absolutely transformed the culture of Bridges. Instead of bringing in kids to my office that may be a bit naughty and may need a little talking to by good old Mr. Brown. So I've really appreciated this opportunity.
I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
The data that you're aggregating, first of all, I think it's fantastic that we're collecting this information. But can you kind of tell us about the workload, this additional workload places on the teachers too, and how they can remain timely with that data while still having a life?
Yeah, well, from my perspective, and feel free to jump in, folks, the reason why we shifted to Tableau is it's very user-friendly. And so it's easily accessible. There's snapshots that you can pull up right away. And what it does is it allows teachers to do what they kind of are doing already, which is making decisions about kids, and to have an easily accessible tool to do that. So it's something that teachers can use to their discretion. It's something that I have used, to which I welcome. And I think it offers an ability for teachers to really reach students in a way that they may not have been able to before. So it certainly offers a bang for its buck that may not have been present previously.
I would just like to add that, I know several board members, you may have been familiar about 6 years ago when we went from no data warehouse to a data warehouse product through TIES. And one of the reasons we made the change to Tableau is, as what Mr. Brown was talking about, the user-friendliness of it, but we're able to get reports and just-in-time information through Tableau that we were not able to get through the TIES product. And so, from my understanding, every night, teachers put in a lot of data into their grade books, into attendance, behavior. Every night, that data is uploaded into Tableau. And so teachers will have that data the following day. Since this is the first year that we're implementing it, we're still in the process of training our teachers how to use this tool. And with it being as user-friendly as it is, we're finding some success with that, but we also know that staff need more time in order to use the tool, understand the tool, because ultimately it will lighten their load, because with the reports being there and being timely as they are.
My question was thank you for that, by the way. My question was really about the additional data entry on behalf of the teachers. Is that not changed? You're just using Tableau as your new data analytics engine, or how does that work?
No, the data is still being entered as it is from grades,
okay.
Attendance. It's the tools to help us pull it for reports.
Thank you.
So it's just a better tool.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So in continuance with this theme, as we look at how we're engaging our students in this work, really the goals, as Jeff mentioned earlier, are right there. It's not about engaging a particular student. It's about excellence for every student, every single student, all students that we work with all day long. And what we do is, through this work, we are increasing their engagement. We're building deeper connections and creating opportunities for them to build better and deeper agency with schools. And Dr. Shiraki Holly has been partnering with us over this school year in wonderful ways to allow us to advance us in this opportunity of continuous improvement. He's provided research-based instructional strategies that are culturally responsive and appropriate, incorporating it into our teaching and learning. And so what's happened during this year is quite a bit along these lines. We've had formal workshops that some of you have attended during the fall and school year. We have included all staff, not just teachers, because teaching children and working with students is not just about any one group, it's about all groups working collaboratively. And so our certified staff, our support staff, other staff members have gone through this training and gone through this work as well. We've implemented now cohorts at every building, and that has happened recently, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done at Bridges with our cohort, and we'll be continuing this work throughout the school year. And so specifically at Bridges, we attended a secondary jumpstart that occurred about a month ago, 6 weeks ago. This was at the high school. So there was a team of teachers from Prior Lake High School and Bridges Area Learning Center that attended a culturally and linguistically responsive teaching and learning workshop that jump-started us in this work during the school year. From that point at Bridges, what I've done in collaboration with my peer coach is I have worked with my staff to go through this material and go through this work. And we've offered sessions and training to help them understand the context of what this is about, the why are we doing this, as well as specific teaching methodologies and strategies to go along with the pedagogy that supports the why. And I think those of you that have attended the training, Jeff can attest to this, he's been at several of ours, it's been very well received because at the end of the day, the goal is educational excellence for all students. And what's happening as now our teachers are launching this into their individual classrooms and using this methodology with their students is we are seeing increased engagement for all students. We are seeing better connections. And at Bridges, it's especially passionate for me because we are working with the students that have had their connections affected the most, that have had, that they don't have connections. And so for us to implement strategies that validate our students, all cultures of students, that affirms them as individuals, that we can begin to build and bridge from where they are to where they can be. It is transformative work. And so far, as we've launched it during the school year, and I've been in several classes, I've asked my teachers, I've said, hey, when you're launching, doing some of these methodologies, some of these protocols, some of these things, invite me in, and they've done that. Our students are engaged. They're not giving us a typical teenage look that many of you may know if you've had teenagers. I have 3 girls, and that's why I don't have any hair. And so they are engaged. They get up, they respond. And I was talking to my math teacher about this as he was using it in some of his problem-solving strategies, and he said, you know, I didn't get to as many problems as I normally would in a traditional sense, but the ones that I got to, kids were really, really deep thinking on these equations. And this isn't something that is the be-all, end-all of how we are teaching. It is simply something that we sprinkle in intentionally, that we insert in intentionally into all of the teaching and learning that happens in a day-to-day environment to achieve our goals. So that's a little bit about Bridges. Others?
Sure. At the middle school, we've had the same opportunities as also Bridges. We did have the Jumpstart workshop that I was able to be a part of. And the biggest thing for me that was the aha was I was able to experience. You know, you can talk at me and you can tell me that this is a strategy that I should use, but until I do the strategy with people around me, then you can actually experience and see what it's really like. The other part that I really appreciate about the CLR strategies is we talk about voice, student voice, getting more student voice in the room. And teachers love to tell everything that they know. That's great. And we want to hear more from the students. So many of these strategies that are in place encourage student voice and understanding and summarizing and where are you coming in? Can you relate to this and draw connections in your own personal life? So that's something that I've experienced with that, just with the training. On December 5th, we had our first walkthrough with Dr. Holly's team. They would go into the teacher's classroom that were involved in the cohorts. They were there for about 20-25 minutes to experience what the teacher was teaching with the students. And then either Mr. K or myself would go back into the classroom so the classroom teacher and Dr. Holly's team member could meet with them and kind of have a recap of this is what I saw and what did you think about this, or could you see that maybe this was more of an opportunity for you to have a pause and have students talking, you know, how was the pace of the lesson? I noticed that you talked for 18 minutes. That's probably a little bit too long, and the culture of kids is they need short bits and they need opportunities to talk to each other and make sense of what they're learning. So the detailed notes that some staff shared with me that the team members took, it was super, super interesting. One of the Spanish teachers, she was like, well, you know, first I put myself out there, and then this person is coming in, and then she like really told me everything that maybe I should be doing, and she said it was kind of hard, but I agreed with absolutely everything that she said, and what I liked about it the best was I could implement it tomorrow. It would make a difference in my classroom, and I know that I was being culturally responsive to these middle school students and what they needed. Another additional walkthrough is coming. On the 15th of January, we're actually doing some more teaching with the other staff members who are not involved in the cohort through our professional development day, where they will actually receive some of these experiences that we received on the Jumpstart Day. In 2 hours, we experienced 22 different strategies. I mean, she just went through tons. So we're gonna take a couple of those and really immerse our staff in those. And then there's 2 additional days that they will come, the Dr. Holly's team will come and observe us. So, and again, it's about culture, it's about kids, it's about all students. It's also about mindset connected to a skill set. So another additional strategy, not the end all be all, but it's that whole piece that we all believe that all students can learn at high levels.
And the elementary schools are right behind those secondary schools. So last month, we had 4 schools that engaged in the Jumpstart session. Edgewood, Loyola del Lago, Red Tail, and Westwood and Greenwood. And so next week, we'll start with those walkthroughs, much like Julie just explained to you. I think it's important also to note that with the 2-hour Jumpstart that we had, like Julie said, it was nonstop action with strategies. But what it's important to know is that what we learned were protocols for students, how to get students to respond, how to incorporate more movement into their days. And also, I don't want to get this wrong here, I'm going to look down here and make sure I have it, protocols for discussion, responding, and for movement. And why is that? Yes, it has to do with all the rings of culture and that we look through all of those lenses. But what is most important is student engagement. So high levels of learning and engagement for our students. It also has to do with recognizing that students are sociocentric by nature and that we must include that in the way we teach. The last thing I'll mention is that we want to also teach situational appropriateness. So we're going to validate and affirm where they've come from, all of us, but we're also going to build and bridge so we can continue to heighten student engagement. Upcoming will be our next cohort, which is Jeffers Pond, Five Hawks, and Glendale. So they will be starting on January 25th. So the work continues, and it's great work.
You know, we'll take a pause here. Do any others have any questions? As you think about that, I just want to applaud the work of our cadres. I think you heard a little bit here, people taking a risk. Again, as much as, everybody believes they do things well, and in some ways having somebody come in and do an observation and kind of hold up that mirror can really be an eye-opening experience, and it doesn't always feel comfortable. And so when we're talking a little bit about the number of staff members that we have participating, by the end of the year, we'll have had over 100, almost 100 staff members participating in this cadre experience. And this is the first year. And from my standpoint, I didn't anticipate we'd have this many people participating. But again, when you're thinking about increased student engagement and professional development and continuing to support teachers and doing great things for kids, that's a great message. And that's what this is all about, is professional development, reflection. And again, I can't say enough about the teachers and cadre members, and I can't say enough about the 3 administrators we have up here, as well as the administrators here, and our other site administrators and program administrators that are also having conversations with their staff around building deeper connection with students. And so, again, we're mid-year. I mean, we're okay, folks. We're 6 months into this. I'm not saying that we're going to be done by the end of the year, but I'm also saying we're off to a good start. And the real litmus here is building on our success and continuing to move forward and continuing to support staff members and, again, connecting with kids so that they build deeper agency in school and feel that connectedness. So I'm going to take a pause here. We've got a couple more slides left, but I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions around the cohorts or of our administrators who are presenting here.
Any comments? Lee?
I just have a couple comments. One, I went to one of Shiraki Hawley's presentations, and one of the biggest eye-openers for me is when he talked about culture. And in my mind, I always thought of different cultures. And he brought forward the culture of the cell phone, where we need to address students where they're at and how they learn in using the cell phone. So that was just a whole nother thought that I hadn't really looked at. So that's really cool. So and I hear you saying those kinds of things, that you're trying to find where the student's coming from and teach them where they're at. And that's always been a passion of mine, that we teach all students. I've always been a big champion of the middle of the road, the kid that does everything right, succeeds, but isn't necessarily the high achiever and doesn't fail. So they need the attention too. Glad to hear that. When Jeff, you referred to the data warehouse, back when we first looked at that, we looked at a couple different models, and in my mind, not knowing anything about it, it's like, well, is this just some bells and whistles that the teachers want because they think it's cool and it's a new trend? And we ended up going with one. And I'm glad that you've researched and used it enough to find one that you like. And I want to thank you very much for explaining how you're using it, because granted, I've had a 2-year break, but this is the first time I've actually really heard how it's being used, and it's very refreshing. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for noticing.
Any other comments?
I have a
Mary.
kind of comment question. First of all, I went to Dr. Shiraki Hawley's thing also, and obviously I had some excellent epiphanies as well as feedback for that. Now, it's really hard, as you're going through this, to actually see metrics or results, because it takes time. And so you're giving us your feedback, I think, about how it's benefiting you and your teaching experience. How do we get that feedback from the students to see if they're more engaged?
That's a great question, because I think some of the matrices are still in progress as we create them. We do student surveys in our courses. That's part of evaluation. We also do end of the year survey. I also anticipate we're a little on the front end of this, but we need a student voice in how this is being transformative as well, and we're just not there yet. I mean, again, with PD and professional development and building opportunities. I mean, as we think about the things we've described to you, this fits very well with our Laker Learning Plan and personalized learning. and our work with AGR, and that's intentional. The initiatives we're doing are not silos, so at some point we need to have the students experience and their voice in this presentation as well. So we need to develop those formal matrices as we move forward once staff have this support in implementing strategies in their classroom.
And just in response to that, one of the things I do is I ask them. I mean, we've been implementing these protocols, and I'll say, what did you think? Or I'll talk to the teachers and ask them what they thought. And the benefit that I have that I really appreciate from my students is they're very honest, and they'll tell me. And the feedback has been very positive. And the thing that I think really resonated with me in some of the sessions I attended with Dr. Holly was his notion that there may not be direct metrics, but these things affect the things that have the direct metrics. So there's second and third order effects that I think we would be able to see some good supporting data with as we go.
What does Dr. Holly say is the maturity level for this type of program? I mean, when do you come that full cycle? Is it a year, 2 years? How do you measure that as far as the time frame from when it settles in?
I would say it's ongoing.
Okay.
Yeah, it is true. It's not work that really stops, but also our focus here with Dr. Holly is continuing to provide that professional development and cadre experience to as many staff as possible over the next 2 to 3 years. And so a sustained professional development for our staff and our commitment as we continue to get better with practices and transform teaching and learning in Prior Lake Savagery schools.
Yep, and one of the things we're doing is we're sending out teams to schools that are farther along in this journey, so that will give us a good feel of the journey. We'll be heading out to Hopkins and Edina schools that have been in this work. And
well, let me ask the question a different way. When does this not become something you're thinking about doing, and when does it become habitual?
Well, I think speaking for myself and just teachers and professionals in general, they're always looking to continually improve.
Right.
And so when you try something new, what I encourage is just try one thing. Can you try one thing in this one lesson, this one time, and see if it makes a difference? And I think that's part of this too, is that you can't bite off everything and chew it all together. Try, after we had the Jump Start, the question was, do all of you feel comfortable moving forward to implement one of these structures or protocols in your classroom? And everybody was, yep, I'm willing to try. So I think part of it is just becoming comfortable with what are those things, and then it just becomes part of your classroom and just who you are as a professional, and knowing, because the kids are going to be more engaged more often, and that's what you want. And more of that student voice is going to come in and less of the teacher voice.
Yeah, Melissa?
Great presentation. I see that our strength based on that presentation is really our data warehouse and the team synthesizing that behavior, that socio-emotional and discipline. Couple of questions. How does the parent and the community come involved? I've seen the hour-and-a-half presentation that Dr. Holly did at Edina. I read through all of his materials that he presented at Rochester, and just want to know how closely that's going to align with the materials that are online and what he's done in Edina with community.
So as we start talking, the student engagement or the parent engagement that we're doing now is connecting with parents around their students. When we're, with students who are underserved, there is a larger presence that we need to get to in year 2 or 3 where we're talking about community engagement and engagement on a broader level. We're just not there yet. He's been very good to work with, and he's been very good to come in and talk with us about our needs, as well as how he has presentations and resources for community. He also has sessions that he does with board members in board work session formats. I know, Dr. Stallo, you had mentioned that maybe down the road, that might be something, in the next couple of years, this might be something this board entertains, a work session with Dr. Holly around the work, which is also part of that broader community for parents, stakeholders, things like that. But we're not there yet, but we will be. It is on the horizon within the next year or 2.
I don't know if the other board members had the opportunity to do a deep dive into the materials, but I wanted to do that to be able to really understand, you know, the full depth. There were some, you know, and if this is really, I mean, the research references are lining up. If we're using those same materials, there are some references that we might want to take a look at as a community before we go further in terms of those. I don't know if those were made aware for other board members or not. Some of the teaching methods. There was a strong tie-in to community, and there was a tie-in to, with some of the references, with conducting home visits, consulting parents, community, and there were some helpful tools that we might want to explore, parent and community input as to whether or not they would want to have the full program. There were some areas that he sees everything through a cultural lens and not through a socioeconomic. There were references, again, to sources on white privilege.
Yeah, actually,
and male
I
privilege.
don't think that research is aligned with our work with Dr. Holly. It's not just ethnicity that we're working with on Dr. Holly. It is on some of those other components. You heard it referenced, and it's not part of our presentation tonight, but our focus is on the rings of culture, from age culture, you heard technology culture, some of those other things, gender culture. We can bring that back in the future as we move forward. But as far as some of the other districts you're referencing, they have worked with multiple consultants and working, as you talk about white privilege or you talk about home visits, that's not something we're at in our journey. At some point it might be, but that's not what our focus is. And it's
This
not
was in Dr. Holly's,
correct.
In his presentation.
Oh, I haven't seen that presentation, so perhaps if you'd share that would be great.
I'd be happy to.
Perfect. But I know in working with him, that's not where we're at in our process. And again, we need to get further along before we get into some of those. I mean, it's complex work. It's dynamic work. And, you know, and that's, as I mentioned, we're 6 months in. And actually, you know, a year of study and then 6 months in. You heard Mr. Brown say, you know, this is ongoing work. And I think as we continue to be ongoing with this work, we have to identify where we're at in the journey as a district, how it fits with our community, how it fits with our students, and how we can continue to improve. It would never be my recommendation that we take a prescribed program in the can and jam it down somebody's throats. And that's why we're with Dr. Holly, because he is somebody that he's committed to working with us and meet our community where we're at. So I can't speak to the presentation that you're referencing. It's certainly not been a presentation that we've shared here in Prior Lake Savage area schools. And anything we do here, we do in partnership with Dr. Holly so that we're comfortable with the message and we're on the same page.
Are there avenues for the board to be able to see materials before they're presented to staff, especially if we're talking about staff-wide?
Got an entire binder that you're more than welcome to. You know, I love what you just said, Jeff. You know, we were really intentional. There was over a year of study with what have other districts experienced, what's an approach that will work for us, and ultimately, you know, our outcomes and our teachers will help us with that. You know, I had a lot of conversations with teachers who understood and valued the importance of equity work and said, but I need some help. I need some strategies. I need some resources. So the year of study that Jeff's team led came us to Cherokee Holly not as the answer, but as an opportunity to start our conversations and to build the Prior Lake Savage area schools equity and excellence plan. He's been an amazing partner and resource for us. You're listening to three experts or emerging experts right now, and staff that I can see as I'm looking at are also heavily engaged in this work right now. The goal of any consultant, such as Dr. Holly, is to build the capacity within so that he goes away. And that's what we're doing. But it's been 6 months. So as we continue to build this plan collaboratively, we're going to learn from him and we're going to learn from one another and we're going to learn from our kids and our families and our community and our teachers, and we're going to build the best approach that brings excellence to Prior Lake Savage area schools and ensures that that mission comes to life for all kids.
I have a quick question on each of those. You have a bullet about walkthroughs and coaching experiences, and one of you maybe foreshadowed about working with other districts. Can you kind of explain what those walkthroughs, coaching experiences involve?
Yep. So in the model that we're using, the first, there's several steps to it. The first step was our workshops, and then the second step was a jump start in which we focused a little bit more on some of these methodologies and strategies that was referenced earlier: attention signals, discussion protocols, culturally responsive movement protocols. And what the progression then was, there were team members from Dr. Holly's team that came into all of our schools. They came into Bridges, Prior Lake High School, middle schools, coming into the elementary schools, and they do an observation. The first one was just a quick observation, 10 to 15 minutes, and then they debriefed with the teacher and had a little reflection, and then they met as a team at the end of the day. The second one is upcoming. I think Ms. Siegel referenced that as well. It's going to be a longer observation where the coach is coming into the classroom and staying in the classroom for the entire period, and then they'll have a significant amount of time one-on-one with just the teacher, and that's sort of where we are with the progression. In addition, we're sending teams out to other schools that are farther along in this journey, just to be observers and to have peer-to-peer conversations on how the work is going in their classroom, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and what sort of nuances or strategies that we could bring back that's appropriate to our schools. And that's sort of where we are in the progression, unless I'm missing something.
Thank you. Todd, did you? Nope. Nope. Okay.
I had one other question, and this, when you mentioned the cohorts in the elementary, middle school, and high school, I think in the beginning, there was a discussion about how the teachers all get together and talk about the students, their behavior, their academics, et cetera, so you're all sharing information. Is that information at all shared between the elementary and middle school during those transition, or the middle school and the high school?
Not yet, at least from my perspective. Again, where we are in the journey, that we're 6 months into it this year, so perhaps that might be something down the road.
Okay.
I think maybe the one thing to think about is, and I think maybe you're foreshadowing something. If you're not, you can take credit for it totally. But every year with, when our 5th graders transition to 6th grade and our 8th graders transition to 9th grade, there are meetings between staffs around transitioning, where students are at, some of the challenges, some of the gaps, some of the things that are areas of excellence, and then how to plan for that. And so, I think our work may shape how we have some of those conversations moving forward, and they should, as we do that. But that's the one thing I think of. I think the big thing that we want to encourage is the strategies that teachers are implementing in their classroom and they're finding success. We want those shared with other teachers. And we want, as much as, if we're finding struggles, we want those shared too so we can support staff. So wherever there's success, we want to share it. We want to continue to fan the flame, so to speak, and keep the momentum going. With that, we'll connect on a few more slides. Thank you. Yep. Again, there are a few things I've referenced before too. We are in an Achievement Integration Plan district with Shakopee and Jordan. We are planning both of those schools have worked with Cherokee Holly in the past. We're finding some nice commonality with our Achievement Integration Plan. We do have a student leadership activity on the horizon coming up. Some details to be TBD, but bringing students together from all 3 districts, talking about their experience as students and how we can, again, ways to find their voice in this process. And then we've also this year are participating as a bit of a tag-along member with the West Metro Education Program, affectionately known as WEMIP. That's a group of West Metro districts. They're part of a consortium that focuses on professional development. They have a great professional development this series where they're bringing in national speakers on technology, on student behavior, on innovation, on equity, and really it aligns well with our focus on instructional excellence and the work that we're doing here. Because it's not just about equity, it's not just about personalized learning, it's about how do we bring all of those together in an integrated way. So, and then the last couple slides here, we want to bring you up to speed on the work of Reimagine Minnesota. I can kick off a little bit if you'd like, Dr. Stallo, and then I'll have you jump in if that's okay. Feel free to interrupt me if you so choose. But the purpose of Reimagine Minnesota was getting together really around how are we best serving students and how are we making connections with students. Are you hearing some similar themes? Because districts across the metro are having very similar conversations. And you know, the purpose of the group and really came together through the work of superintendents through AMSD, AMSCD, and MASA is really what's our purpose? And it's a commitment to create lasting equity and excellence in education for all students. Seems kind of familiar. Excellence for all students aligns with the work that we're doing. So we're finding some nice connections here. The group also participated and planned some planning steps. You may recall we hosted one of the World Cafes last year between Shakopee, Eden Prairie, and ourselves. And again, pulling that, I think there were several World Cafes across the metro area with the purpose of bringing community dialogue in-house to say, you know, how are schools connecting? Where can we find common ground to see improvement? How can we build deeper connection? What are we missing? And that include business, community leaders forum, government higher education in a similar dialogue. And really over the course of, I think, 6 or 7 months through the World Cafe model, they synthesized those comments and insights, ideas and themes through that engagement process. And so where we're at, or where Reimagine Minnesota is really, they've identified 3 strategy areas. One on teaching and teachers, again, professional development, and increasing, you know, student engagement in the classroom and student agency. Student and family support. How are we supporting families and students through programs, but also through community outreach? You know, tonight with Laker Pride was a prime example. The Chamber of Commerce, we do have families in need in this community. So again, how, you know, as a similarity, how are we connecting with students and families? And then also system funding and leadership. There certainly are things that we do at the local level, but there's a conversation to be had at the state and perhaps federal level. And I know as a board, you have a legislative platform group that meets, and so this also fits a little bit with the work of our district. And that's why I put the note there. The strategy areas are aligned, and we're finding a lot of connection with our priority work, goals, and process. And so the goals of Reimagine Minnesota is, again, effective, diverse stakeholders, using trusting relationships to create welcoming classrooms, schools and communities that meet the needs or hopes and dreams of all students and families. The second goal is personalized, relevant education and youth development that guarantees access to rigorous learning and eliminating predictability based on race. And equitable resources beyond money, but also time and talent aligned to student needs, again, hopes and dreams that enable every district to see all and serve all. And so, again, we know that there's disproportionate funding mechanisms that are coming to district. How can we level that so that all students have the same access and funding platforms to provide high quality education? And so, again, a really comprehensive study and engagement of community dialogue, and really we're at kind of the summation point of really another round of feedback on the work of how it's come forward. So I know, Dr. Stallo, you've also been at the table with some of that work, and I would open it up to you.
Sounds
if
great.
you could
Thanks,
share some
Jeff.
of your insights.
Thank you, Jeff. And I just want to publicly thank you for your leadership and for ensuring that we did a year's worth of study in order to find a pathway for us moving forward. So I want to thank you for that. Rich got a chance to join me at the AMSD conference, which really was that unveiling of the Reimagine Minnesota plan, and Todd certainly has been a part of that as the board representative to AMSD. And exactly as Jeff said, you know, there now is a plan with 9 strategies under these 3 themes. And the question at this point, and actually after AMSD on Friday, districts and superintendents stayed really to share and say, so what are you doing with it? So how is this working? How are you looking at this Reimagine Minnesota work in your districts? And the way that I responded to that is a way that I heard several of my colleagues respond to it. I said, what we're doing is we're looking at the work that we're doing at Prior Lake Savage Area Schools around excellence and equity. And everyone that was at least at the talking table that I was at, all of the districts there, they're also doing some work. It's not like people are sitting around saying we have achievement gaps and we're not doing anything about them. People have been working and trying strategies and really getting plans in place. This is the first time that at least I can think of where a collaborative group of districts led by superintendents have come together collaboratively around a common mission and vision. And it wasn't MDE mandated, it wasn't legislatively run, it wasn't a punitive kind of thing. It was, how do we collectively listen to over 3,000 voices through World Cafes and an entire World Cafe of just student voice? And how do we reimagine a different educational system in Minnesota? And that's what the work is. What we'll continue to do is we'll look at the Reimagine Minnesota work and see how it continues to align to our work. Our work will drive what we do here, but we'll certainly look at that. And you're going to hear, when you look at the Imagine Minnesota work, it's a lot of what you just heard, student engagement. It's a lot of student voice. It's a lot of instructional excellence and transforming pedagogy to make sure that we're meeting the needs of kids, personalized learning, all of those kinds of things. So I don't see it as different or new or more work for us. I see it as a way to continue to help support us as a district, because we're in this together with almost every other metro district, and now figuring out how do we, you know, really involve those districts who haven't been involved since the beginning. So it's an exciting time, and I'll be sure that you all have access. I'll send that out to you to make sure you have access to the report as it stands right now with Reimagine Minnesota. But it's an exciting time for the state and certainly for our district to be a part of something so collaborative around kids. Thank you.
I guess if I could add, one of the most eye-opening things I saw at that Reimagine was when they had a session for just the students. I think it was Mary here who asked the questions about, are we serving students' need? And that was really eye-opening, where they just brought the students together from different districts in the metro area, and they talked about what they need and how they are interacted with. One of the interesting things was the young student, I think she was from Nigeria, I forget her name, she said where she grew up in Nigeria, they didn't reference her as a girl or boy or black or white. It's just a person. And then she came to this state, and they're putting her, you're a girl, you're black, and they're focusing solutions on her based on that delineations. And she thought that was really quite different from where she grew up. So that was pretty eye-opening for me.
With that, we're at the end of our presentation. I think we've had a pretty good discussion. It's sort of a redundant slide. Yeah. But if, you know, again, we wanted to give you an update of our work with excellence and equity. Again, you know, we will continue to keep you updated on our work, get you the information that we're presenting to staff, sharing to staff. Again, as we have Dr. Holly come back, we'll send you invites as board members. You're always invited and encouraged to attend per your schedule if it allows. Certainly too, you know, as we continue to have our walkthroughs and receive our feedback and continue to get better, you know, we'll continue to bring that feedback back to you and make sure you have the information you have about this important work. So, thank you.
Melissa, one second. I think Melissa had another question.
Yeah, if we go back to slide 19, we didn't really get the opportunity to ask questions about what we've seen just now for the first time, which is participation in the West Metro Education Program. We haven't heard that before. 18 months ago, we looked at participating with another group, and the board decided that that wasn't something that we wanted to do at that time. But can we just run through how we chose West Metro and how far through we are, or how affiliated we are with them?
So for West Metro, participation as a professional development series, so it's funded out of PD. We have approximately 8 staff members. We have some teachers, administrators, site administrators, and they're participating on a PD session. So they're hearing a speaker and then also working together as a team aligned to our work. So we're not a member of WEMIP, but they opened it up to membership districts in order to gauge interest of other districts. They wanted to send individuals to come to this. So this is very similar. This isn't anything that's out of the ordinary when it comes from professional development. And I can also send you information on that and the speakers that our group has also been hearing.
I did some digging into West Metro too. And I do, as a board, I think we have maybe want to take a deeper look at that before we have full participation with all of our staff.
I don't think that's the plan, is to have full participation with all of our staff.
Okay. It didn't say exactly on the PowerPoint, so wanted to just clarify that. It just said participation.
No, I appreciate the question. I mean, we have about, like I mentioned, 8. Sometimes we've had a couple more go because it's been topical, but it's not a district-wide participation. It's really by seat. And so, it's good PD. The speakers that are presenting are national speakers that, these are well-known folks. These are things that a lot of our staff participate either on their own time or they hope to go to, because a lot of times these are speakers that do not come to Minnesota. So it's a series that we're doing this year. Again, we're not making a recommendation to join any group or to become part of any group, but we had an opportunity that seemed to fit a lot of the work of priorities and our work that we're doing as a district for this year.
So it's just for staff as they want to. The students aren't participating. I know they have a level in the program with student participation, so I just needed to clarify that.
No, again, we're not engaged with them as an intermediate district, or it's just for the series of, and it's the same consistent 8 to 10 individuals attending the series. We have another one on Thursday coming up with Eric Scheninger. He's a national presenter. So
thanks for that clarification.
Yep.
And then lastly, with our PDSA team, is there a way that we can have them take a look at alternative programs, other teaching methodologies that aren't necessarily focused on cultural responsive strategies? Because there are other things that can help all learners.
Not right now. I would say based on the goals that we have, it's been pretty clearly delineated, but certainly that all comes through the board. So if there's some goals that we're working on that aren't board supported, we'll get a chance in the spring as we review where we are with board goals and bring forward recommendations moving forward. So if there's any of these board goals that our board doesn't support, we certainly would need to know that.
Seeing none, thank you.
thank you.
Oh, I guess you can't go. Next up is the approval
You
of the
got me
joint
for a little
MinCaps
bit
agreement.
The next item is in your board packet is the agreement to partner with Lakeville Area Public Schools through the Innovation Zone legislation to continue with MinCaps. To set some context, prior to Thanksgiving break, as a board, you had a joint meeting with the Lakeville Area Public School Board, and then our coordinator, Eric Sill, provided an overview of the courses and the recommendation for the pathways moving forward. Also shared with you a draft of the application for Innovation Zone for the Department of Education, as well as this joint agreement to share services. So tonight I'm seeking approval to move forward with continuing this joint venture with Lakeville Area Public Schools.
All right, do I have a motion for the approval of the joint MinCaps agreement?
So made.
By Stacy, do I have a second?
Second.
By Mary. Any discussions or questions?
I have one question.
Go ahead, Todd.
Lakeville took an extra month to look at this. Were there any changes from our initial?
No, there were no changes. Okay. There were no substantial changes to the agreement. Probably that's a great question. One of the changes, and this was by design, the first 3 years of the program were split 50-50 evenly. As we move forward, our new 3-year agreement would represent a per pupil unit funding for the program. But to direct answer your question, I don't understand, or I don't believe there were any changes. I think they just need more time to look at it.
Thanks.
Jeff, I've got a question.
Go ahead, Mary.
With regards to the ongoing building use for MnCAPS and the continued lease of that building and how that's going to work, could you elaborate on that a little bit?
So we're currently in year 2 of a 5-year lease, so we have 3 years remaining on that lease with an opportunity to extend it for another 5 years, should we choose to do so.
But we will not choose to do so with Lakeville. They're not going to be in that building. I thought there was some change there.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Nope.
Additional questions?
Yeah, one of my other questions was in this, you know, as I've been working with MnCAPS more and more, and we are talking about equity and excellence, one of the things that does concern me is the fact that kids cannot participate in MnCAPS unless they've got a car. And that does leave quite a few out because they have to have a car at 16, and I understand they're changing the curriculum for the 2-year arrangement, but what are our options to mitigate that, or have we even considered that going forward?
You know, that's a great question. You know, it fits well in when we're talking about access and removing barriers for kids participating in these options or in this program. At the beginning, we made a decision that we look at students driving, and I think it's important to note it's not just driving from Prior Lake High School to the MnCAPS building. It's also then to the internships or business meetings or experiences that are happening for students throughout their program. So it's not just driving from high school to MnCAPS, it's then driving in other different places. You know, I think families do understand that commitment. I'm sure there have been some challenges there. But I think one way to mitigate that is at some point as a board or as a district having a conversation around, do we run a shuttle bus? And then for larger type, you know, where there's full group, we could certainly look at other ways to provide transportation to those experiences where, you know, majority of students are participating in it. We're certainly open to looking at that for sure. And I know if there's any student that, right now, if there's any student that wants to participate in MnCAPS, even though we don't have a formal shuttle, we'd find a way to somehow make it work so that they could participate.
And I can speak to that.
Go ahead, Todd.
They do work with them. We had the experience with our daughter that she needed a ride for a couple weeks, and Melanie at the time was very workable with that situation.
But certainly, if we'd like to look at a more formalized transportation approach, I think that's something we could certainly look at.
I think that's something we should look at in the future to make it more equitable, because there's some kids who will never be able to, or some families who will never be able to afford a car, and there's some families who, quite frankly, don't want their 16-year-old to drive that much at first. So.
It's true. I mean, it's you talk about responsibility, and there is that level of responsibility for that part of the program. So.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, and we have a motion out there. Do we have a motion in a second? Yes, we do. So all those in favor of the approval of the joint MnCAPS agreement signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Holmberg, you're up again.
The third presentation for the evening. It is shorter, but definitely it's equally as important as the previous two. I want to provide an overview with you this evening around our design team and stakeholder engagement process relative to our construction. I know as board members, some of you have said, hey, I've got people saying, what does it look like as we go through this design team process? How do we continue to be engaged as a community with the additions and renovations? And what does that communication look like as we move forward from staff to students to parents? And so I know Christy has been heavily involved in this, as with Dr. Stallo. And so I want to provide really the overview of, you know, how we're going to be going through the next several months / years in this process as we continue, as we build and complete our additions, design, build, complete, and then open them. So our presentation overview, I'll share with you the infamous Gantt chart, which I shared at a previous meeting. I assure you it is smaller than the previous version, but it's only for symbolic purposes only. I'll talk with you about our systematic overview of the design phase, and then underneath I'll provide explanation. What are the groups doing from a participants, goals and responsibilities, the core teams, as well as site and department communications. And then the last two is really where board engagement is, and I apologize. The Finance and Facilities Committee, I misnamed that. It should be Finance, Facilities, and Long Range Planning Committee. So that's a standing committee that I'll talk about, and then I'll wrap up by talking about what the board and the work of the board in this. So again, as I reference, here's our Gantt chart. Everywhere there's something in blue, you show that there's a design team process, and you know, this is a project that is going to have multiple core teams and design teams and simultaneous teams at all facets of the project. The scope of the project will determine really the size and how many times the meetings will take place. For example, if we're looking at a renovation of a smaller area such as Glendale, that's looking to be during the course of a couple meetings versus as we think about Prior Lake High School, which will have renovations and additions on all sides of the building over the next several years. Even as we look at a new elementary school on a flat level piece of property. You know, so I'll talk a little bit about all the differences and what that looks like throughout the process. But as you can see, we're already in the design team phase and stakeholder engagement part for many of these projects, with many more coming up over the next several months. This is a schematic that, for lack of a better word, where I really want, you know, Christy spent some time with this. We talked a little bit about this and saying, you know, how do we encapsulate all these words into like a picture? You know, so when somebody says, hey, where's me in this process? They can say, hey, look at that. And so as we look at our core planning group to the left-hand side, that's a schematic that we received from our partners, Nexus and Wold and Mike DeVetter, to say, here's how we encourage stakeholder and provide input. Every team has a core planning group. So Glendale has a core planning team. Jeffers Pond has a core planning team. Grainwood has a core planning team. Prior Lake High School has a core planning team. The middle schools will have a core planning team. And the core planning team consists of the individuals or the groups that are around that. And that's a group throughout those different processes that will meet anywhere from 3 up to 7 or possibly even 10 times to go through different processes and talking about planning for the facilities. And the role is understanding, looking at best practice, looking at providing feedback about the types of programs that may be in those additions, renovations, or new sites, but also seeing too, what's the current trends in construction? You know, what are other districts doing when it comes to educational space? And then again, how is educational space being used to facilitate project-based learning or students having social connections? And also, how do we continue to make this space just as relevant as what it's going to be when we open it a year from now to being relevant 50 years from now? This is a long-term investment. It's an investment in our community, and it has to continue to be just as useful the day it opens as, you know, day 300 or however long. But their role is making recommendations to the Administrative Leadership Design Team. I'll share who those folks are. So they're, over the course of the core planning team process, as they meet and continue to make recommendations, the Administrative Leadership Design Team meets every Tuesday. So this will be an ongoing meeting, really for the next 3 years, I think we established. because that's from the time frame of beginning to end with this construction. We're paying attention to this project because it's important, and we're going to make sure that we're paying attention to the details and we're being accountable and transparent to our community. The next group is that Finance, Facilities, and Long-Range Planning Committee, and that's, again, those are feedback loops and loops where there's communication going in between all of those three groups, with ultimately coming to the board, the school board, as the decision maker. School board members, you're taking action on the final schematics, the budget, all of the different components, and I'll share with you in further detail. So throughout this process, you're going to be getting the feedback, the recommendations through multiple lenses and layers so that you have the information that you have at your disposal to make the best decision as a board you can for the facilities we're going to move forward with for Prior Lake Savage Area Schools. So if there's some way that you can kind of capture that and keep that in your mind, that's going to be something that we're going to be posting, and again, should serve as a way to say, here's how we're having this participatory process. Our administrative leadership design team is largely consists of these folks: Dr. Stallo, Ms. Sink, Mr. Delwell, myself, and then my assistant, and then Mrs. Telusty, finance assistant, from the standpoint of coordinating the meetings, coordinating the meeting notes, all of the financial information, POs. That's the support team, ensuring that we're keeping track of all of the different meetings, all of the different input and decisions that are happening at the different core teams. Our partners are also resources in this process. Nexus Wold Architects and Engineers and DeVetter Design Group. But ultimately, this is a team that meets every Tuesday as we meet with core groups, as we plan, go through the designs, take the input, perspective, moving forward. We also have on those Tuesdays a broader constituency. Executive directors, coordinators, principals, and assistant principals. We will be meeting with them periodically and regularly around the additions, around the construction that's happening in their building through the design phase, the preparation phase, the construction phase, and the opening phase. Those groups, we anticipate anywhere from 2 to 4 times a month. Again, if it's Tuesday, we're going to be talking some level of this project, where again, project meetings and updates, inputs, insight, feedback loops, and making sure we're on time or adjusting timelines as necessary. The goals and responsibilities of the administrative leadership design team is ensuring that the process is for design, organized, and facilitated in the planning, bidding, construction, opening of facilities, all is aligned, and that we're detailing the process and we have everything clearly delineated, articulated, and accountable to throughout the process. Budget, ensuring that we have the financial system development and oversight so that as we move into this work, we are tracking it, we're ensuring that bills are paid, and we're staying within budget. Alignment, that the project and designs are aligned to the approved referendum plan and budget. You know, what was presented was approved by the board, was voted on by the community. What comes out in the end of the construction has to match that. And so that's part of our work. Stakeholder participation, listen, acknowledge, incorporate stakeholder feedback, and communications, updates, recommendations for board consideration and approval, and also the broader school district stakeholders at large. One thing I want to note here too, this also includes city partners. You know, as we start talking about, you know, construction, we have to bring in the cities of Prior Lake and Savage for necessary permitting, all of those different types of things. So there's a much broader community that we're working with as we move forward with the construction. I'll segue now to the core team process. School and facilities planning is, you know, again, a broad stakeholder-based participatory process. And that graphic I shared with you is the approach that we're going to incorporate to bring in feedback. The core teams will be developed at each site for the facilities updates and construction projects, and based on the scope of the project. So our core teams are going to have some different sizes to them. So, and that's what the third bullet point is. The size of the core teams will be commensurate with the site project scope, additions, and or new facilities. So for example, we're using, and I'll share with you this on the next one here, is for some of our smaller additions, we're using our instructional leadership teams with the principal, and we're adding parent reps on that at some of our elementaries. For Prior Lake High School, we have a larger core group, but then we also have subgroups, which will then allow for more stakeholders to participate because it's a larger project. And some of that space is a little bit more specialized. For the example, the activities area, the lunch and servery area, and then the office, entrance, IT area. So it's a larger building, larger project, so we're going to have multiple different layers of stakeholder engagement. For the new elementary school, we've not developed that core team yet, but that will be broad-based. We don't have staff assigned to the new building. We don't have students assigned to the new building. But essentially, when we're looking at, basically a clear piece of property, we're going to have a little bit more conversation about that group. And that process, there will be more meetings and more time demands devoted to looking at a brand new school, elementary school, taking school tours, things like that. Goals and responsibilities of the core team is really guide and direct design for expected new facilities, review the draft concepts of the additions and projects, offer input and suggestions, serve as a communication loop to site stakeholders for the project, and seek input from a broader group of site stakeholders. And then make recommendations regarding the scope and components of the project. And ultimately, their responsibility is continuing to make recommendations to the leadership administrative design team for inclusion in the design and project scope. Ultimately, if we do our jobs well, there are no surprises. We continue to have clear, open, honest dialogue and feedback loops throughout the process and incorporate the suggestions and recommendations as necessary. Moving into the higher level beyond administrative leadership design team, we have the finance, facilities, and long-range planning committee. This is a standing district committee comprised of district admin, buildings and ground staff, district staff, and 3 school board reps. Role of this group is review designs, project scopes, including the stakeholder input throughout the design and planning process, and then oversight and review, looking at interim and final designs, looking at the bid process, construction progress, completion, the project scope, inclusive of budget, of additions, renovations, new facilities, and then also ensuring or looking at making sure that designs and project scope are aligned to the approved referendum plan. This is a group that's historically met once a month. Given the construction season, this is a group that will start to bump up their meeting schedule 1 to 2, most likely 2 times per month, and then also as needed for facilities and construction projects. And then at school board meetings. School board as a whole approves the designs of the new facility additions project scopes, inclusive of the budget parameters. As the board, you have the final say moving forward. Continuing to encourage stakeholder input throughout the design and planning process, and ultimately takes formal action or approval of the final designs, bid process and acceptance, commencing construction, the project scope, again, budget, looking at, and again, ensuring that what you're taking action on is aligned to the approved referendum plan and budget. And I think I'm not saying this lightly here, but I would anticipate that at regular meetings and at work sessions, facilities and construction updates are going to be a standing item. Just as we start to get into this work, as we're already into this work, it's going to be important as we move forward as a board, you understand where we're at in the process, also have the opportunity to ask questions and engage in this work so that you can take action when the time is right and feel informed as a board member on taking action. So, and then also, we of course have updates on our website, have another web address, /construction. Thank you, Christy. Again, we want to For the people that are in our community, we want to ensure that we're giving frequent updates, but also there's an opportunity there for people who are not on a design team to continue to offer input or share questions about the process moving forward. When those input questions come in, we want to respond to them, and it will also help us incorporate that into our presentation so that we can answer that publicly and also bring that to the board for consideration as well. With that, that's our design team and stakeholder engagement process in a nutshell.
All
Questions?
right. Any questions for Mr. Holmberg?
I have one question, and this is with the elementary school. Do we have that underway now? Do we have a purchase agreement or a decision on any of that?
So right now where we're at with the purchase agreements, we're in the process of drafting a final, the actual purchase agreement. We're moving from that letter of intent to in earnest negotiations and that purchase agreement. So I would anticipate that that will be coming. We should hopefully have a draft by the end of February that we can speak to the board to. I would expect that looking at our process, that will start with administrative leadership design team, go to the Finance Facilities Long Range Planning Committee, and then ultimately to the board. So the purchase agreement will come through that loop moving forward before the board is asked to take action on that. I anticipate in March.
Okay. Has there been any update on their findings of mineral, anything like that they were testing on to see when we could actually start?
I believe we're still under the same plan as what we apprised the board back at that work session. I think we're still on par for a 2020 opening, so a year later than what we originally anticipated, given the mineral that's there that they're anticipating to mine. I haven't heard anything differently recently.
Okay.
Any others?
You're asking
Go
for
ahead, Lee.
approval on the process? Is that where we're at?
No, there's no approval. This is just a report only.
Okay, so I do have a question. At what point will the board, as a board, see some design that's been set? I mean, will there be an opportunity for the board to see it as it's going through the process? Or is it going to be after everyone's done all the work and then the board sees it?
You know, somewhere in the middle there has to be, we're going to be having that, those things come forward. For example, right now with our 4 elementary schools with additions and renovations, we had one core group meeting back in December. We have our next one tomorrow, which is approximately halfway through with the project, and then we'll have the final meeting of the core group in the beginning of February. At that point, between January and February, we'll bring the designs to the Facilities Finance Long Range Planning Committee so that there's a feedback loop there. And then pending moving forward after the core team meeting in February, we would bring it to the board for review and subsequent approval, because at that point we'd be pretty close to going out for bid at the end of February. That's one example.
Okay. I guess what I'm wondering is if things would come to the board where we had a chance to review it and it could go back to the core group or to whichever level it needs to go back to before it comes for final approval to the board?
Certainly.
I don't see that in the process, so I'm just wondering if that's going to happen. Besides facilities and finance and long-range planning.
I would anticipate with larger projects it will.
Okay.
With smaller projects, I'm not certain if that's necessary. Or if I would anticipate, with a classroom renovation, it's one thing, but as we're talking about the additions and the types of things that are happening at the high school and the middle school, which are larger projects, we've intentionally designed or set aside time at Dr. Stallo's request during work sessions to go through designs. And share some of the deeper work, because some of that is it is a little larger, and we don't want to come all of a sudden to a board meeting where we're expecting you to take action and it's a first look. That's never our intent and not our intent.
I just wanted that reassurance. Thank you.
In my conversations with Dr. Stallo, yes, board sessions will be full of design reviews. Any other questions for Jeff right now? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Go rest your voice. Next up on the agenda is preschool rates for 2018-19, presented by Early Childhood Director Ms. Becca Richardson.
Well, hi, good evening, everyone. I'll give you a little respite from the very good presenter, Mr. Holmberg, but I know you've had him for a long time. So you did. I appreciate that, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm here tonight. We are requesting a 6.7% increase in our full day tuition rates for our Circle of Friends preschool. So our half-day program rates, we are requesting remain the same. And we came to this conclusion. Every year we go through just a comparative tuition analysis. We look at just local market rates of comparative programs. And then if you think about what our program is, there's actually very few that are apples to apples in our community. So we also look district-wide. We look at districts with similar demographics and also districts that geographically are located near us and compare those rates as well. Our advisory council, they're a fabulous group, support us in gathering this information as we cannot do that as employees on our own. And looking that over, we found that we are significantly lower this year than other similar programs. And I know that in the past, one of the pretty clear board directives has been to make sure that we are a choice and not undercutting or a competitor and things like that. So that's one of the reasons for the suggested increase. The other reason for the proposed increase is just increase in revenue would be offset by anticipated increases in salary benefits and program costs for the upcoming year. So that's what I have for you tonight.
All right. First of all, do I have a motion for the acceptance of this preschool rates for 2018 and 19?
So moved.
By Lee, do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
By Mary. Are there any questions? Comments?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mary.
I've got a question. You mentioned the increase in salary benefits, et cetera. Is there any prediction on inflationary factors plus that increase going over the next couple of years so we can let people know or at least plan ahead for this?
Sure. Can I ask a clarifying question? As far as letting people know, you mean people who would be choosing to attend this program then paying for it in the future?
Correct.
You know, I would say that's not necessarily something I could answer tonight. I don't have data forecast out for many years, really beyond next year. I think it, you know, depending on when contracts are renegotiated, we never really know what's going to happen in that case. So I'm comfortable answering towards next year. I wouldn't be comfortable yet answering towards future years, but I'm happy to look at that for you if you'd like and share what I can come up with.
The only reason why I ask that is because in some of the other districts, they actually include annual inflationary factors that they
Sure.
That they kind of include in their projection out, and it doesn't go very many years out, 2 or 3 years at best. That way they can kind of plan ahead, and then they can also not increase every year, but increase and wait for those steps to occur. Also because obviously we're dealing with young kids in preschool, so you do deal with different generations. So
We
you're
sure
not
do.
shock value.
Yep.
That kind of helps. My last question is, you compared the districts. One of the things that I've been surprised about is the number of families in my own neighborhood that are sending their kids to Mystic Lake now for both the after school as well as for the preschool. I noticed that that wasn't included here. Is that just because it wasn't comparative, or is there other reasons?
Yeah, I'd say one of the main reasons is I wouldn't necessarily include that as a comparative program. I think it's pretty different as far as how it is staffed, the people that choose to use it, and kind of what they offer versus what we offer in a program. A family choosing that might be looking for something different. It might be proximity-wise, you know, it's kind of nicely located if you're heading northwest, I think something like that. We really looked at, I think the most programs that I hear about as a coordinator from families asking me, we had our Peek into Preschool event tonight, so I just spoke with a lot of families about preschool, and I hear about New Horizon, or I hear about Little Lakers, or I hear about, you know, there's Shepherd of the Lake or St. Mike's. Those are really the ones that I find come up. I actually have never had a family ask me about that as a comparative. It's certainly something we could consider including in our future. We do this every year, so that's definitely one we could put in there too. Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Melissa?
I know when this came up last year, we did have a comparator of other programs that were in our area in Pryor Lake Savage. So before I'd be able to make a decision, I'd have to be able to see that, because we were in line with other local providers, and I wouldn't want to, like you had earlier alluded, our board is real cognizant of not pricing out other local businesses. So I would need to see a local comparison before I could make a decision.
Sure, I do have that information. I don't have it right here in front of me as well because that wasn't part of the board packet, but I do have that information pulled as well. That one gets a little trickier just when you think an apples to apples comparison. So you're thinking about the hours that the program is open. You're thinking about the qualifications of the staff that are in the program as well. Thinking about the number of days per year. It's a lot trickier, I found, when I was looking at that really closely this year in particular, to compare, you know, what food is included. Is there breakfast? Is there lunch? Is there snack? Are there field trips? Are they bringing in enrichment programs? There was a lot more of those pieces attached to it that make it hard to give you a chart like the one that I included here for you. So I guess I can certainly pull something up if that's what you are requesting as a board you'd like me to do, or if you're comfortable with what we have, I take your direction.
We have a motion and a second to approve the rates as presented. So are there any more questions or comments? Right.
Mike,
Go
I
ahead,
just have
Lee.
one quick comment. This was presented that these are schools, a comparison schools to schools, so it's not schools to private or anything like that. That's what this is, correct?
Correct.
And
The
that's
one
what-
included in the packet is
that's what
a
you're asked
school
to do.
program to a school program, correct.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments?
And to
Melissa?
clarify, the third paragraph, the end paragraph says that the proposed rate increase is to subsidize anticipated program cost increases. So we're not raising the prices, we're being asked to subsidize it. So I need clarification there.
Are you asking me or are you asking the board?
I'm not sure.
Go ahead, Beck. You want to take a shot at it?
I sure do. Thank you, Rich.
Go on.
Maybe subsidized was probably a loaded word to use. We're not subsidizing in terms of supporting anything. It's what tuition payments would cover. We are a tuition-based program. We don't receive any funding from the Big O1 school district fund. We do receive some school readiness funding, and we do receive, there are some scholarship early learning grants that we receive that support tuition, but I would maybe ask that you replace subsidize with offset. I think you can also see that in the paragraph, and really we know that these pieces will be increasing in some way next year, and therefore tuition would also increase to cover that cost, just as any business type would do. That's what I would ask you to do.
Yeah, I was going to recommend changing it to cover, the word cover.
I like that, thank you.
Okay. So,
I'll take
well,
that.
you mentioned it, so.
Thanks.
So, any other questions for Becca? Seeing none and having a motion on the table, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
That passes 5-1.
Thank you.
Next up is Kids Company rates for 2018-19.
Good evening.
Presented by Kids Company Coordinator Kelly Vossen.
Thank you. Good evening. Just like Becca, Kids Company is also requesting approval for rate increases. We're looking at 50 cents on our per session, which is before school or after school, and then $1 on our day, non-school day and summer program. And you can see from the comparisons, we're really quite reasonable. We're actually below many of our neighboring districts, and with the exception of New Prague and Jordan, but they're always much lower than us.
All right, do I have a motion for the acceptance of the Kids Company rates for 2018 and 19?
So moved.
By Lee, do I have a second?
Second.
By Stacy. Are there any questions or comments for Kelly?
I have one question.
Go ahead, Mary.
Does this include the busing to and from?
No.
Okay, how does that work?
Parents drop off and pick up. We're open from 6:30 a.m. to 6 p.m., so they drop off before school at their child's school.
Right. Okay, and then
Up in the evening. Yep, after school. So then the kids come to us after school and stay till parents pick up.
as we go into the construction year next year, and is there going to be any impact upon where Kids Company is going to be located, or is that already figured out?
We've had many conversations. It won't impact the school year too much, and we're talking about some creative planning for summer.
Okay, that's what, I didn't know if that required any transportation or shared or going back and forth between locations.
No, I don't anticipate that it's going to affect the school year before and after school.
Okay, good.
Any other questions, comments? Go ahead, Lee.
I would just make one comment. With the kids' company as well as the preschool, I know that the early childhood family ed council spends a lot of time going over all of these numbers, and they're very cautious about what they do raise, and they want to keep it family friendly. So I appreciate the work, and I will support this.
And I will say, as a parent who had children who loved this program, it is a great program. I fully support it too. So, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next on the agenda is the approval of resolutions for fully funded special education services. A little background information. I was able in the last couple of years to be a delegate to the Delegate Assembly for the MSBA. At that Delegate Assembly meeting, they come up with resolutions that drive MSBA in all their legislative priorities, and it sets the MSB legislative platform. The two resolutions provided in tonight's agenda packet are two resolutions that have been forwarded to all school districts in the state and will drive policies and guidelines and legislative priorities. The MSBA has asked school districts to call on state and federal lawmakers to help draw attention to the cross-subsidy issue. The two resolutions brought before you will help create statewide and national momentum to develop a plan to resolve this issue. Once passed, they will be submitted to MSBA, who in turn will hand-deliver the resolutions to members of our Congress in early February, and each resolution should be will be handled separately in tonight's board or in tonight's agenda packet. So, do I have a motion? Give me 1 second here. A motion for the first resolution to be submitted for the state of Minnesota.
So moved.
By Melissa. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Stacy. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, this is a resolution, so it requires a roll call vote. Melissa?
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. That passes 6-0. And the second resolution MSBA is asking is on the federal level. Again, you see it there. And it's any questions or comments on this one? I have did I take a motion?
No, you need a motion on this one.
Okay, I need a motion for this resolution.
So made.
By Stacy, and a second.
Second.
By Lee. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, this also is a resolution and requires a roll call vote.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That too also passes 6-0. That brings us to the administrative reports. Dr. Stahlo with the superintendent report.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. At Prior Lake Savage Area Schools, our mission is to educate all learners to reach their full potential as contributing and productive members of our ever-changing global community. Our collective work is focused on this, and tonight I'd like to highlight a bit of the work in which we've been engaged. It's hard to believe on January 8th, but we are busily preparing for kindergarten registration coming up this month on January 18th, and as a result, the elementary principals hosted an information session for all parents of incoming kindergarten students, the class of 2031. This is a popular event for new parents each year. Grainwood was the host of this site with more than 300 parents in attendance. The event was an opportunity for parents to learn about our full-day kindergarten program along with Lola del Lago, our Spanish immersion option. Registration packages have been mailed to parents, and all information presented last Thursday night is posted on our website. To communicate school closures, emergencies, and other important information, the district uses a messaging system that allows us to send phone calls, emails, text messages to a large number of subscribers. Our provider of this service was recently purchased, so we are making the transition this week to a new product called School Messenger. In researching the new product, we see it as a positive change that offers improved features, and we anticipate a smooth transition between the projects. I just also want to be noted that I anticipate anticipate a very warm and mild winter, so I hope to not be using this new system for any inclement weather. Recently, a communication was sent out to opt-in text messaging instructions. If you have not done so already, parents and staff, including board members who have a cell phone number on file with the district, you can opt in by texting Y to 67587 from your mobile device. And I can get that information to you if you need it again. This is optional only, so you don't need to receive text messages from the district. You don't have to opt into it. And we will be testing this system with a message sent this Friday, January 12th. And I'm certain it won't be a weather-related announcement. The Minnesota School Board Association formally recognizes members who complete 100 or more hours of attendance at MSBA or NSBA-sponsored meetings and activities within a 4-year period of time. Our board chair, Rich Wolf, has attained this achievement and has received the Director's Award for 2017-18. Congratulations. Thank you. All MSBA award winners will be honored at the upcoming Leadership Conference Recognition Luncheon this Thursday, January 11th. I want to congratulate Rich, and I want to thank him publicly for the hours that he spends serving our Prior Lake Savage area schools, students, families, parents, and community. And finally, I'd like to congratulate and send congratulations to this year's Prior Lake Savage Area School Teachers of the Year. The annual celebration is sponsored by the Prior Lake Savage Education Association. In each of the district's buildings, an exemplary teacher was chosen by staff to represent the quality and contributions of all Prior Lake Savage Area School educators. A celebration will be held on Monday, January 15th from 3:30 to 4:30 at Twin Oaks Middle School. This year's honorees are as follows. Kind of feel with the Golden Globes that I should have an envelope or something. Shayna Bates from Westwood. Megan Fulton from Prior Lake High School. Chris Fernie from Jeffers Pond. Becca Gillette from Glendale. Mary Kozlovich from Five Hawks. Stacy Kadada from Red Tail Ridge. Rachel McKay from Twin Oaks. Kim Peacock from Edgewood. Mallory Schultz from Gradenwood, and Nicole Tuma from Hidden Oaks. Teachers don't go into this profession to get awards or to get recognition, so when it happens, it's really an amazing thing. I'd like to congratulate all of our teachers, and especially those who are being celebrated and recognized this year. Thank you.
Are there any administrative reports? Ms. Sink.
Today, Dr. Stallo and I had an opportunity to have our Moody's rating call. This call is about an hour-long phone call with members of Ehlers and Associates and a representative from Moody's. And we go through quite an extensive discussion about our school district, including our enrollment, our demographic study. We talk about our community and the growth in our community and where that is coming from. We talk about our district's mission statement and our values and goals for our district. Like I said, it takes about an hour for us to go through this call. And what it does is they make a decision then about the rating of our credit rating of our district. As you know, just last year we were upgraded to a AA2. I don't anticipate that we will have an additional upgrade at this point, but I do see that we will stay very favorable with the rating that we do have. We will find out on Friday the actual results of that phone call today.
Are there any board reports? Go ahead, Lee. Or Stacy. Melissa?
Stacy.
Okay, Stacy.
Do you want me to community engagement? Okay. So Melissa and I had a community engagement meeting with Dr. Stallo. Late December, I guess. It was pretty close to Christmas. And we just kind of talked about a couple things, just set up the time. I think that you guys all know, meeting with our legislatures in February to talk about our platform. And we discussed our platform as well, which I think we're going to bring forward at the next study session, rough draft of that. And then discussed a little bit the survey questions that we had on last year regarding the board, and gave some input as far as that. And so I think all that's going to be discussed at the next study session, but we did have a meeting in late December.
And we had a facilities meeting mid-December, And that seems so long ago. But it's exciting because we started talking about the actual process of what we're going to be going through to get everything all built finally. And we looked at the 2 elementary schools and looking at the options and alternative concepts into how that will get built, and you know, how it all gets put together and what kind of options we have for it. So there was a lot of discussion on that and the process. So it was kind of an exciting meeting.
I too attended the Facilities Committee meeting and the Reimagine Minnesota meeting that I spoke about earlier. Mary. Todd, anything? All right. Next on to future events, MSB Annual Leadership Conference is this week. We'll have the early bird session Wednesday evening. Several of you have signed up to one of those 2 sessions, and we're having dinner prior to that. Have we settled on a location?
Yes, I will email you tomorrow with time, once I get reservations with the time and location.
Okay, thank you. And then the conference is Thursday and Friday of this week. There's no school, January 15th, in observance for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. District kindergarten registration, as mentioned, will be January 18th at Edgewood and all elementaries. We'll have a study session on January 22nd, 2018, right here, and the end of the quarter for the school is January 25th. Seeing no other items on the agenda, do I have a motion for adjournment of the meeting?
So moved.
By Todd, do I have a second?
Second.
By Mary. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0. This meeting is now adjourned.